Hi everybody. In this video I'm going to go over block printing or relief printing, which encompasses cutting into linoleum and wood blocks or even making your own stamp. It covers a variety of things. Anything that you can basically do to carve relief out of a surface is considered a block print. We're going to go over some techniques, different materials to use, and kind of get you guys started on how to create a good print. Plates come in different types of material. Linoleum comes in the orange, which is a bit more hard. There are wooden surfaces. There are linoleum battleship gray surfaces that are unmounted, and mounted gray linoleum surfaces, which are a little bit sturdy, will last a little bit longer. We also have the tools. Tools come in different brands. FlexCut makes tools, Speedball makes a tool, and NC Lion makes tools. All the tools are basically similar in the fact that they have different types of beveled surfaces or curves that cut out different types of angles out of your block. The way that you hold the tool is really important. You want to make sure you keep that little grip towards the center of your palm. You want to either have your thumb or your forefinger on the top of the tool, and you're pushing down without pushing directly down, pushing down directly across the surface. This FlexCut tool, same thing. You want to make sure you have it in your palm, holding it firmly. You're always pushing across, and you're never really pushing down towards the surface. And the one thing you want to pay attention to is whatever tool you have in your hand, never keep your fingers above the tool when you're holding your plate. You want to keep it off to the side. You don't want to have that tool go in and pinch your finger and cut an area of your finger off. That would be bad. Even if you're using the Speedball tool, you want to make sure your hand is off to the side so that you're holding that plate down and you're cutting away from your finger, rotating the plate in the direction that you want it to go in. All right? Never, ever, ever, ever do that. So I like to have a Sharpie handy. Sharpie is a really good way to kind of make marks on my surface. Normally I'd have a drawing transferred already to the surface, but for this demo, we're just going to go ahead and Sharpie some shapes. We're going to make lines. I think it's really important that everyone understands how to make a positive and negative shape. So this demonstration is going to cover a few different types of cuts, different ways to kind of think about those cuts, using your tools like a Sharpie to kind of allow you to see the surface of the linoleum a little bit better. So I'm going to use my Sharpie to make some marks. And let's go ahead and show you how to put that Speedball tool in. The Speedball tool has a little opening, and on the opening it's got a wider side. You want to slide your tool into that wider side, and then you're going to take it and re-tighten the shaft of the Speedball opening at the very end. Make sure that that tool is not going to come out, and it should be flush with the base of the tool. I'm going to hold my tool as close to the surface as possible, and one of the things that you'll see me look for is that the linoleum that is coming out of the tool has a consistent thickness, right? If it has a consistent thickness, that means that my line is the right consistency. One of the errors that you tend to make is pushing too hard. Here's another tool. This is a NC Lion's tool, and I intentionally kind of had it diving into the plate. And you'll see it leaves a ridge. And that's something that you want to avoid. You want to be able to control your cut. So that means that you want to stay close to the surface of the linoleum and make sure that your tool doesn't dip underneath. Here's another shape. We're going to use that shape to kind of show you how to make another cut. This one's a little bit more difficult because it's really shallow. Problem is, what I see a lot of students do, a lot of young artists, is that they'll dive too deep. They'll try and cut out a lot of material. You want to make sure that you stay on the surface of your material once again, or else you're going to get a really erratic, uncontrolled cut to the extent where you can pull out way too much of that linoleum, and you'll end up with a cut that you really can't control. And the whole idea is that you want to make sure that you're not going in too deep, that your finger's not losing a pinky, that you're not losing any blood, and that it's not getting stuck along the way so that you end up with a cut that's really, really clean. All right. Here's my FlexCut tool, really, really fine line. Once again, I'm looking for a curl that has a really consistent edge. I can always go back and start from where I left off. But what I don't want to do is push so hard that the tool kind of falls underneath my linoleum and gets stuck, pulling up a lot of material in the process. Here is another example of a tool. This one's much harder because the tool is so fine. You really want to keep that tool high so that you can make your line. Okay, not the best line that I've ever made, but just as an example. Alright, so now we're going to talk about cutting positive and negative shapes. Anytime I'm cutting a really specific shape, what I like to do is take my blade, it could be an X-Acto blade or this blade that I have from Lions, and I want to cut that shape out. That shape becomes a leader edge for my linoleum tool. I'm going to take my speedball, the really fine point, and I'm going to lift it and place it right along the edge of that X-Acto cut that I made. And I'm going to let that blade cut, that X-Acto cut, kind of guide my tool along. Once again, I'm not going in too deep. You don't want the linoleum to ever go over the tool. And now I have my 4 sides. I can pull up a bigger tool and I can go through and using my bigger tool clean out the excess information without having a bunch of chattery marks. And then if I have enough control, I could even use that big tool and use that X-Acto blade edge to kind of follow the shape that I cut out on the outside edge of my box. One thing with linoleum you always want to remember is whatever stays high is going to get printed. Whatever you're cutting out is going to be white, right? It's not going to carry ink. So that being said, I want that line of the box to show, so I'm cutting out everything around that line. Now here I have an ellipse or a curve. This is a kind of a unique cut, so I'm going to show you this because I want you to understand that what you want to do is actually turn the plate, keeping your tool in place with very little momentum from your tool. Most of what's happening is the action in your plate, sorry my hand's covering it, is turning the plate so that it cuts. Your plate, right, in your hand position has as much importance as the cutting itself. You always want to have both participating hand in hand. You don't just want to like stay stationary and be cutting your shapes out. I'm going to go ahead and cut these organic shapes. I'm going to use my tools just to kind of cut erratic marks on top. I'm going to leave those cuts there intentionally. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to really precisely cut the base so I can have an edge that looks like it is hand done, and then an edge that is very specifically following the design of my marks that I created. Once I get that hand cut shape, I'm going to take my really shallow tool, and here's another cut that I want to show you guys. All right, I'm going to cut into it. Then I'm going to take the other side of my blade and I'm going to tilt it very carefully and just kind of cut in until it meets that other piece that I cut. And that should just lift off and it will leave me a very hard edge. So if you're looking for a hard edge, that is a good technique to kind of do. And then I want to remove all that excess chatter. I'm going to come in with my shallow tool and kind of do that. Now a lot of people have trouble with thicks and thins. And thicks and thins, right, getting that curve to kind of move is all about pressure. I'm going to use my Sharpie here to kind of show you what I'm talking about. If I'm pushing down on a surface and pulling up on a surface, what I want to do is look at the type of material that's being pulled off, and that will help me to kind of see what kind of line that I'm making. So pressure does have a significance, but if I'm pushing way too hard into the surface, what's going to happen? Right, my tool is going to get stuck and I'm going to ruin what is possibly a very important cut. So by going thick to thin, I always want to make sure that the top of my tool never dips underneath my linoleum. Here's one last thing that I'm going to kind of show you guys, how to take a shape and how to make it positive and negative. Anytime I'm making a curve, remember you want to turn your plate. I'm going to create that line as a line, and then I'm going to come in, I'm going to create that exact same shape, but instead of having the shape be positive, I'm going to remove that shape and have the lines be negative. So now I'm going to use my really fine tool. I'm going to trace the outside of that line. Once again, I could do it with an X-Acto if I wanted to. I just used a really fine tool. I'm going to cut out all that interior material. I want to make sure it's as clean as possible. I'm going to use the edge once again to clean up any surfaces that I don't want to see. So I'm always switching between tools depending on the type of cut that I want to get. Here once again I'm using my really fine tool to clean up my edge. I'm going to go through and now have my positive shape sitting next to my negative shape or my line work based shape. And that way I can kind of show you what both of those shapes are going to look like as well as the line in between. just making a couple of refined adjustments. I really want to have like a pointy straight on that, so I'm going in and cutting a little bit deeper than I probably needed to, but just cleaning it up. I'm going to use a Speedball ink, which is a water-based ink. The first thing you want to do anytime you pull out ink is mix it up and kind of manipulate it a little bit so it gets a little bit heated. And then I'm going to take my roller and I'm going to roll it out so it gets really, really fine, so that it kind of feels like a vellum finish. A lot of people say it has a very specific sound. It's basically a sound that's not so sticky. I'm going to roll my ink in one direction only, and then I'm going to roll it in the other direction, always going back and forth into that palette if I need more ink. I'm going to come back over, roll it in the other direction. I'm going to do this maybe 3 or 4 times on the first time that I ink it. If I see any excess material the very first time I ink, I will kind of remove that material. It's not a good thing to do really when you already inked it, because that stuff will end up getting stuck in the ink, but I'm doing it anyway. I'm just kind of cutting corners here. Not a good tactic to follow, but if you want to kind of see what areas you need to clean up, it's definitely a possibility. Just be careful that you don't get those scraps in your ink and on your plate, because it will print. Alright, I'm going to take my paper. I'm going to lay my paper on top. I'm going to use a Baron. I'm just going to push down in a circular motion, and I want to make sure that I'm getting all those surfaces that are raised, because those are the areas that are going to carry ink. I'm pushing consistently and evenly across the whole plate to make sure all the ink is kind of falling off of that surface that I just made and sticking to that paper as evenly as possible. I'm going to use a spoon to finish up my printing. I'm placing all my pressure and pushing hard in the center of the spoon, going in a circular motion once again, and then I'm kind of looking for the relief on the other side of my paper as I'm doing it. I'm going to pull it up. While holding it down, I'm just going to kind of test a corner, and voila. And now you can kind of see the two prints. Now, obviously this print is not a perfect print. All I want to do is get you guys understanding what happens when you're looking at a negative and positive shape, and how those shapes tend to look when you finally get them printed. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to drop them below. Otherwise, good luck on your block printing adventures.